Welcome to this edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley coming to you from Washington, D.C. It is the late afternoon of Friday, the 20th of April, 2018, and we're getting a taste of Appalachian spring here. Most of the cherry blossoms have departed, blown down, and blasted by cold temperatures. We've had freezing overnight for the last couple of days, but the overall tendency is springtime. And the big exception is that for the regime, for this White House and these congressional Republicans, winter is just around the corner. Winter is coming. And we're going to devote significant time to that today. However, let us go right away into the thick of things, in medias res, concerning the press conference held by Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister Abe this past week. Now, that was a summit in its own right, the Trump-Abe summit. And this was against the backdrop of this probable, mooted meeting of Trump with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And from this proceeding, we have to, I think, draw certain conclusions and stake out a position which is maybe not popular, but I'm sure much safer than the idiotic delusions being sponsored by people who should know better. The preface is, diplomacy is generally better than no diplomacy. Certainly, diplomacy is better than war, if it comes down to that. But not necessarily is diplomacy always a good thing. Sometimes diplomacy is just what you don't need. It would be better if everybody stayed home. And our classic example, of course, is 80 years ago, the Munich sellout of September 1938, an international conference attended by Hitler for Germany, by Sir Neville Chamberlain for Great Britain, Daladier for France, Mussolini for Italy, the Czechs, Czechoslovakia, President Beneš, I guess, he was there, and he was not invited. He was in power in Prague, but he was not invited. Prague in the news. This was Prague 80 years ago. So Czechoslovakia not invited to a conference to decide its own fate. Not very good. And this, of course, was the monster fest of appeasement. And within 1 year, you had the beginning of a world war. So that is not successful diplomacy. Now, when you look at the hypothesis of a confab of Don and Kim Don, the Kim Don summit, is that a good idea? We say it's a bad idea. It should not happen. Work to make sure it doesn't happen. There are plenty of objective tendencies already at work that would tend to make this summit less likely. The mental instability of the contenders, right? The so-called participants, but there's a whole lot more. This is too risky. The calculation of possible benefit with danger as it stacked up against the danger, this is off the charts. This is out of this world. There's nothing that can be obtained with this. And of course, the world ether is being filled with the dulcet tones of the bait designed to awaken the desire to bite. Now, I mixed some metaphors there, but I'm on good philosophical ground. The bait to awaken the desire to bite is, these are the promises coming from Kim. Yeah, we can have denuclearization. Yeah, we can even have denuclearization and the U.S. keep some troops in South Korea. Don't believe this stuff. It's too good to be true. Some people, again, just want to be duped. The Trump regime overall, Trump, wants, desperately yearns for some kind of a diplomatic victory. They think this might turn around the looming debacle of the November election, the blue wave breaking over the heads of Trump and his retainers and his cohorts there. But for the rest of us, of course, not so. You can't believe this stuff. It's pie in the sky. It's a utopia. Let's look at the concrete possibilities. The summit is in one way a grave danger of confrontation. It's a grave danger of sellout, too. We think that the North Koreans are probably not capable of a real sellout, but that you can't tell. And, of course, the other thing is, within the Trump regime, within the ranks of Trump and his true believers who really think that some kind of denuclearization is within reach, there's another smaller group which reportedly says, hey, we'll try summitry. Summitry will fail because of the well-known track record of the North Korean Mad Dog regime, right? Mad Dog Kim from the Kim hereditary communist dynasty. And then, once summitry has failed, the initiative will pass to the warmongers in the Trump entourage, the Boltons, the Pompeos, and so forth. That's the danger. That's your scenario. The danger scenario is conference breaks down, debacle, warmongers get the upper hand, and they then parlay that into a military confrontation where they would say, well, we tried. We went the extra mile, but we can't do any miracles when this Kim refuses to bargain in good faith. Now let's examine some of this stuff. Pompeo, right? Pompey. This is not Pompey the Great. This is Pompeo Minimo, as we call him here, right? Little Pompey, and this is a tool of the Koch interests, right? This is basically he's going to be the foreign minister of Koch, the secretary of the Koch state within a state. And this won't be the only state within a state in the way things are going, right? The way the oligarchs are pulling this government apart like warm bread. They're pulling it apart. So Pompeo goes to North Korea, and he comes back and he says it went very smoothly, or he tells that to Trump, and Trump repeats it. Well, do tell. Let's ask some obvious questions to Pompey the Small here. First of all, did you come up with a date, a calendar date for this summit? No, not even mentioned. No reference to when it might occur. How about an estimate of how long the conference could be scheduled? No, not a word. How about a venue? How about a location for this conference? Do we have any ideas? No. Do we have an agenda, right? They may not want to reveal all of this, but they could at least say, yes, we worked on an agenda. No, there's no agenda because, of course, Trump says, get me in a room and I'll solve everything. I'll turn on the old charm. He actually said this about Putin. He said the Russiagate scandal. This is now Trump talking. Trump said, I can't be president with the cloud of the Russiagate scandal hanging over my head. I can't turn on the charm with Putin because I can't, in other words, I can't make appeasement concessions. I can't play the role of Sir Neville Chamberlain with appeasement and concessions. If you don't have not even an agenda, but documents done in advance, watch out. Trump will sell you out, and we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C., reminding you got to keep up with us every evening, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as well as Saturday and Sunday with the help of this broadcast. You've got to go to americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv, sign up, nominal fee, and you can then get a solid hour of analysis and the world historical insights that you need to make sense of a fast-moving world. So AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv. So Pompey the Little, Pompeo Minimo, goes to Pyongyang. He comes back and he says it went smoothly. What do you got to show for it? Did you come back empty-handed? Kissinger, somebody like this, as NSC director, would have had the sense to say, I need some kind of a concession to convince the American people that this is real. He brings back nothing. So there's no date. There's no venue. There's no duration of the conference. There's no agenda. And again, if you really want to have such a conference, which we say no, don't do it. But for the diehards, you got to go into that conference with everything negotiated in advance. In other words, Trump's theory of what's going to happen here, that he's going to go into the room, sit down, turn on the old charm, and he's going to essentially hypnotize Kim of North Korea from that crazy communist dynasty, right? He'll say, your country is a family business. I understand. I have a family business in the White House. We have more in common than you think, Kim. Let's make a deal. Down that path lies catastrophe. It won't work. If you were going to do this at all, the summit would become a signing ceremony, right? You can go back to when the deals were actually made. The SALT Accords, SALT 1, SALT 2, START, INF, the Reagan-Gorbachev diplomacy in particular, the summits they had that were successful in the formal sense, not content, because we wouldn't say that they were very successful in terms of content, although they were minimally successful. They could have been much worse. But if you're going to do that, what the two people at the summit do is sign something that's already been worked out in advance. And that Trump doesn't understand that that's the way it works. So the date, the venue, the agenda. Oh, and if you want to have this approach that I'm just saying, you have to set up a joint commission. In other words, you got to set up a group of 2 or 3 people that are going to work pretty much all day, every day, right? If not 24/7, then, 8, 10, 12 hours a day from now until this conference to work out what the details are. Trump doesn't see it that way. He thinks he can wing it. And again, he thinks that this charisma that he has, he's obviously been reading Max Weber's account of the charismatic leader. I think Trump is also influenced by Goethe's notion of the demonic individual, right? As we find in Goethe's famous work, Dichtung und Wahrheit, right? Poetry and truth. Yes, the demonic individual and that hypnotic charisma that they use to control the people around them. How about something even more tangible, right? Something the man in the street could grasp. North Korea has 3, count them 3, 1, 2, 3 U.S. hostages. Couldn't you pry loose at least one hostage? Then you could bring the hostage out and say, here, look, these talks are real. We got a hostage out. No hostage. So you tell me what that's worth. Is that auspicious? I don't see that as auspicious. I see that as an insult. That's demeaning. Because remember, in the mentality of these diplomatic characters, the U.S. is doing North Korea a big favor by having a summit. It's true, and in terms of the summit. Now, we recommend, of course, we are from the school, as you know, of Cardinal Richelieu of France back in the 1600s. Richelieu says, negotiate with everybody all the time. It'll be good for you, even before it's leading to any concrete things, because you'll be better informed. But that does not mean have summits, have improvised, unprepared, seat of the pants, winging it, top of the head summits all the time. No, it doesn't mean that. It means have diplomatic contact through experienced diplomats. And that's really why diplomats are a good thing. So we are not happy with any of that. And we don't trust Trump, okay? In case there's any doubt, right? we have arrived at a very firm, philosophically apodictic conclusion, right? There's no room for doubt that Trump is a public menace. He's a threat. He's an existential threat to the existence of the United States, and none of us will be safe in our lives, in our property, in our aspirations, in our cultural life. None of that will be safe as long as Trump is in the White House. So he has got to be ushered out in the most polite but the most expeditious and effective way possible. Now, we've already warned you. The main scenario is if the summit breaks down in humiliation, then we may be headed for war. Now, in the Far East, right, in the lands of Confucian civilization and so forth, and this really does pose a problem of cultural communication, right, cross-cultural communication. The concept of personal dignity in the Far East is very, very strong. And this is what is known as face, saving face, losing face. Now, there's that. On the other side, we have the fact that Trump periodically has what amount to psychotic fits. He has episodes, right? He's unstable. So how do we know that he hasn't figured out that this is more important than previous ones? Well, in this meeting, the press conference in particular, between Trump and Abe, Trump says, if this summit doesn't look like a good thing, I won't go. I won't go? Yes, he says, if it doesn't look good, I simply won't go. I'll call it off. And then he says, if I get there and I decide that the summit is not working well, that it's not fruitful, I think he says, if it's not going to be fruitful, I won't go. And if I get there and then find out that it's not on a fruitful path, I will respectfully leave. This is an illusion. This is a danger. This is essentially a prelude to God knows what, and we don't want to find out. That Trump thinks that he can walk out on little Kim, where for Kim, one of the benefits of this is obviously the fact of having a summit and being treated properly, politely, and of not losing face. You make him lose face, you've sent him into his own psychotic fit, and you may be close to World War III. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So when you are out there in the Far East, on the Asian littoral, in the Western Pacific, and on those coasts, if you ask, what time is it? The answer is always, it's face time. Face. Personal dignity in the Confucian or traditional sense. And if you go into a summit with little Kim and then you storm out, and we can imagine it wouldn't be respectful. If it's Trump, it won't be respectful. He can't be respectful because he'll be having a fit about his own image as he fails at the summit and walks out. So suppose Trump walks out spewing insults, gets to work on Twitter on that long flight back from Europe or back from Asia, wherever it is. This is a recipe for disaster. Now, is Trump so mercurial, so unpredictable? I remember once talking to a representative of the German foreign ministry in Bonn back then, and he said, we don't like Carter because Carter is unpredictable, right? Unberechenbar. That got on the cover of Der Spiegel in those years. All right, so what's with Trump? Is he predictable? No, he's not. He is the greatest flip-flopper, right? Remember when the Republicans used to object to flip-flopping? They said John Kerry, flip-flop, flip-flop. Now we have Donald Trump, flip-flop, flip-flop. Of course, this is the least, a very minor thing from some points of view, but not in this context now. This is now a big deal. So Trump says, I want to get back into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right? After years and campaigning and months, and the campaign trail, he says, let's get back into the TPP. He finds out something about that, and he says, no, I don't like the TPP. I love only bilateral. Again, where this comes from, other than Bannon, we really can't tell, right? Everything bilateral. It's ridiculous. This is the pre-1914 stuff. So let's have a world that can so easily slip into world war, right? Because it's all this bilateral stuff and the sovereign states until then it crystallizes into alliances once again. Well, you've already got the alliances, so why not short circuit the whole thing? So on TPP, he flip-flopped. How about, we'll talk about it maybe more later, but 60 Russian diplomats expelled. Trump says, yeah, go ahead. We can match Europe. This is, by the way, a quotation from Trump, which will live in infamy, okay? Trump will live in infamy with this quote where it looks to me like they conned him, and they would be some combination of McMaster and or Tillerson. And Trump says, I'll match what the Europeans do. And they cleverly interpret this as meaning take the total of the 25 or so countries in Europe, and then the U.S. matches that. And, of course, what Trump meant was, well, if Germany and France kick out 4, then I'll kick out 4. But the U.S. kicked out 60. So he finds that out, and he flip-flops. He says, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And then we run into the next flip-flop on the list, right, which is economic sanctions against Russia. In this case, sanctions, since you're so damn concerned about poison gas in Syria, there was a plan to sanction, to embargo certain Russian corporations and companies that were thought to have played a key role in bringing poison gas into the Middle East. Now, I don't know what proof they have. I'm not arguing the merits of that one. It's just the formality of Trump says he's for it. The talking points go out. Nikki Haley, ambitious as she is, a warmonger, of course. There's some report that she's conniving with Pence to kick Trump off the ticket for 2020. And then what? She fights it out with Pence? Because Pence doesn't want to be vice president again, I wouldn't think. And Haley certainly wants to be president. She wants to shatter that glass ceiling. God help us if it's Haley. But the sanctions. And Trump says, no, wait a minute. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable. Let's roll that back. Forget that. Belay that. Send a message to the Russian embassy. There will be no sanctions. Whatever Haley says, disregard Haley. There will be no sanctions. So there we go. We have 3 big strategic flip-flops. The TPP. You want it? You don't want it. The 60 expulsions. You like it? Then you don't like it. All right. There was a little flim-flam. And then this thing with the sanctions where Trump obviously then flip-flops again. Now, you want him in a life-or-death conference with a nuclear power across from him, minor though it is, and then the 2 totalitarian behemoths that share borders with North Korea? What are you going to do? You're going to have a war with North Korea, and there's Razin on the Russian side and the entire Yalu River on the Chinese side. No, 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 no. We don't want any of this. You also notice that we're being told now that the Russian Federation, not wanting to miss out on a good thing. I think the Russian Federation, Lavrov and company, they're well informed, of course. They can see that Trump is in big danger. We're told that Trump's lawyer, Cohen, and this is coming from Cohen's lawyer says that Michael Cohen is going to be indicted soon. What is soon? Well, we already calculated, right? If you go from the raid on Manafort to the indictment of Manafort, right? So this was an August raid on Manafort's home. No knock, right? Come barging right in. That was, I believe, 94 days from the raid until the indictment, which I think was right before Halloween, right? So it was late October. 94 days, 3 months. Well, in this case, we've had a raid on Cohen. Man, have we had it. And I have to complete the catalog, right? This was a raid on Cohen's apartment in New York City, in Manhattan, a hotel room that he maintained in New York City. His offices, he had sublet something from this Baker and Boggs in the 30 Rockefeller Plaza, right? 30 Rock. And they had gotten to his email and his safe deposit box. So they had him covered. Well, how long from raid, and especially a raid like that? That was one ambitious raid with the added hurdle that this was all a supposedly attorney-client privilege. Of course, it probably wasn't, but the argument could have been that it was. And then how long is it going to be before that turns into an indictment? And then from the indictment of Cohen, is that the moment where Cohen begins to sing when he says a contract with the Metropolitan Opera for my voice is going to be more important than my pledges of fealty and loyalty and as a loyal servitor of Trump and the Trump entity there? No, says Cohen, how can I betray my family, my Ukrainian wife, and all these other people that are counting on me? No, he's going to have a vocal tryout with not only with these people in the Southern District, but also with Mueller. And from there on, how long can Trump stay on in office? Because that's going to be a lot of stuff. So I think the Russian foreign ministry says, hey, look, we better get a summit going of our own. Right? The Russians are saying, look, we're letting grass grow under our feet. We've got to have a summit with Trump so we can lock in appeasement gains. Trump the appeaser, how long will he be around? Will Trump still be here in a year? The Russians figure maybe not. So let's try to lock in appeasement gains right now. And we say no to that one too, because Trump is not competent to go into any summits. He's psychologically, mentally too weak. He's dangerous. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So there would be much more to say about this, but we want to counsel against diplomacy. There should not be any summits. Let me correct it. We're all for diplomacy. We need to have a State Department. It should be staffed with people who know what they're doing, minimal levels of competence, please, but no personal diplomacy. We don't want Trump sitting down in any room with any foreign leader. Go back to the famous observations of Dean Acheson in that book of his, Present at the Creation, where he says, I stepped on President Truman's foot and told him to essentially to get him to stop assenting to things British Prime Minister Clement Attlee was saying, and said, let Attlee say everything he wants to, and then we'll begin to respond. And his bottom line is, when the chief of state fumbles in a summit, the goal line is wide open behind him. You want your fate in this world with intercontinental ballistic missiles and hydrogen bombs, and Putin is trying to scare you with them, right? He's got the Satan II ICBM pointed at you. That's his young gun. So you want to put Trump in there? No, 1,000 times no. Let the diplomats do that stuff. Trump should get out on the golf course. We're hoping for a new birth of golf in the Trump administration. By the way, the champion is not Trump. Eisenhower was the champion, right? Eisenhower would go to Augusta, and he was famous, right? If you remember the columnist for the Washington Post, Herblock, right? Herbert Block, unabashed liberal, anti-Nixon. He was pro-Watergate, ouster of Nixon. He would one of his themes was that Eisenhower was always out on the golf course. Now Eisenhower was a titan. He was a model of statesmanship compared to Trump, but you get the idea. Now, within all this, Bolton has told Antonov, the Russian ambassador these days, that the U.S. wants to hear what's with Skripal, what's your formal answer on the poisoning of Skripal, And Bolton brought it up. What's with the meddling? This is more than Trump has ever been able to do. Notice, though, Bolton didn't ask about Syria, as far as we can see. This was a face-to-face meeting, so there is something a bit strange going on there. And you notice, again, if Trump says, I don't want to sanction Russian companies dealing with poison gas components in Syria, all of that stuff about humanity and how deeply moved you were and how you've got to see the horrors of people getting gassed, put that out the window. That's just an act. Another one is that the Japanese have learned, you can see from ABBA, that they have learned how to get to Trump, right? With the question in their case of the abductees, the people that North Korea has kidnapped. They've obviously done a big number on Trump with these abductees to try to get him to think more charitably about Japan. And it was not to just think of it as a trade deficit. And I would also say the incompetence of the Trump regime is that the key man for the U.S. in the Far East, well, there are two, but ABBA is the greater of the two. ABBA, Japan, you've got to keep them on your side. If you didn't have them, you would be literally nowhere. You would be out of the picture. You would be not competing. You'd be an also ran or maybe a never ran. And then, of course, President Moon of South Korea. So those two, you've got to keep those people together and not worry about that horrible void that you always feel gaping within you, left over from God knows what trauma with your mother or your father. And you can't go in there and act like a rent-gouging, penny ante, nickel nursing Queen's landlord from the 1950s, 60s, or 70s. But that's, of course, what you're going to get. Now then, concerning the other latest news, we have a sign of life from the Democratic Party. We are just, we want to extend our congratulations to Tom Perez. This happened this morning. The Democratic National Committee has filed a civil lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, right? This is not Mueller, against the Russian government, the Trump campaign and associated persons, and Wikileaks. It alleges an illegal conspiracy to influence the outcome of this election. Now, I would say that sells this a little bit short. What we seem to see here is an attempt to invoke civil RICO. That's what this is. Civil RICO, according to numerous legal commentators, very well versed in this, and we'll cite you chapter and verse. So those accused, let's actually just we'll call up the lawsuit here in a jiffy. And who is being sued? Now, the idea is that there was a conspiracy under RICO, racketeer influenced and corrupt organizations. Now, there's criminal RICO. The government can do that. They allege an ongoing criminal conspiracy. They have to prove that there were at least two predicate actions, two things that make the pattern. They've got to show, I think, at least one overt act in this. And you can do it, again, as a civil RICO. This is a statute that has been abused, but this is exactly what it's for. It's often used against mafia families. And the thing that you don't want to be is in the nomenclature of RICO, there's such a thing as being a kingpin. In other words, a kingpin, sort of like a mob boss, right? Like Gotti or somebody like this. The kingpin is the one who's going to get targeted the most. So this is civil RICO, and we're going to be fascinated to see now who are the defendants. It's the Democratic National Committee is the plaintiff, and now let's go through a list of the defendants. We're just going to read it off. The Russian Federation, the Russian government, the Kremlin, in other words, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, GRU. Now, I think they have that not quite right. The GRU is an intelligence agency, which is the intelligence arm of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. It's something like the Defense Intelligence Agency. They also sue a GRU operative using the pseudonym Gufficer 2.0. They sue Aras Iskenorovich Agalarov, the patriarch, oligarch of this family over there. And you'll remember when we had the June 2016 meeting, the Veselnitskaya meeting in Trump Tower, the emails that Don Jr. received came from this Goldstone, the music promoter, but they were referring to the Agalarov family getting Yuri Chaika, the Attorney General of Russia, top government official, cabinet level, involved in favor of Trump. So this Agalarov, right, these are partners. These are the correspondents of Trump. And Emin Araz Agalarov, this is the young crooner, right, the singer that was involved with this, right, who was coming to the meeting, or was scheduled to be there. Joseph Mifsud. Joseph Mifsud is the professor from Malta who was instrumental in telling Papadopoulos that, yes, the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton. This is a professor who would constantly go back to Russia to take part in these, I guess it's the St. Petersburg discussion. I'll check the name on that in just a second. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. This is your host, Webster Tarpley, speaking from Washington, D.C. Now, we just want to continue with this summary of a very important document, I think, something that it shows also an appropriate fighting spirit in the Democratic National Committee, where certainly in 2016 they didn't have it, right? This Wasserman Schultz, she was not one of the great captains in terms of political fighting. So the Democratic National Committee in New York, Southern District, Manhattan, suing the Russian Federation, the Russian General Staff, the GRU, that is the intelligence agency of the Russian General Staff, the specific GRU operative using the name Gufficer 2.0, Agalarov the Elder, the billionaire oligarch, Aras Agalarov, the younger Agalarov. He is a crooner, a pop singer. He performed at the Miss Universe in 2013. Among his listeners was, of course, Don. Joseph Mifsud. Mifsud is a member of the Valdai Group. The Valdai Group. That's the elite oligarch discussion group. He's a professor from Malta. He's one of the people who communicated to Papadopoulos that Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton. And this is exactly what this lawsuit is alleging. Wikileaks is sued. Julian Assange personally sued. How about that? But also, Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated sued. Donald J. Trump Jr. sued. Paul J. Manafort Jr., that's Manafort, sued. Roger Stone sued. Jared Kushner sued. George Papadopoulos sued. Richard W. Gates sued. And then there are 10 John Does, right? 10 John Does that are not named, not sued. Now, what is the complaint? Well, let's just tick them off. Computer fraud and abuse, federal. Civil RICO, federal. RICO conspiracy, federal. Wiretap Act, federal. Stored communications, federal. Digital Millennium Copyright, federal. misappropriation of trade secrets under the Defend Trade Secrets Act, federal. Now we go to state, essentially, right? The Washington, D.C. Uniform Trade Secrets Act, also, that's D.C. Trespassing, according to D.C. common law. Trespass to chattels under Virginia law. Conspiracy to commit trespass to chattels, Virginia. Virginia computer crimes, Virginia. So those are the charges. And this is, what do we got? We got a good long document. It's about 50 pages, packed with stuff. So they bring this action. No one is above the law. In the run-up to the 2016 election, Russia mounted a brazen attack on American democracy. The opening salvo was a cyber attack on the DNC carried out on American soil. Now, does the DNC have standing to sue the Russian government? They say they do, because they're a private entity, and if the Russian government destroys the property of a private entity, they then acquire a grievance which can be fought out in the courts. A little bit more from this beginning note. In the Trump campaign, Russia found a willing and active partner in this effort of subversion. In 2016, individuals tied to the Kremlin notified the Trump campaign that Russia intended to interfere with our democracy. Veselnitskaya, Kaveladze, Akhmetshin, and so forth. That group, under the aegis of Agalarov and above all of Yuri Chaika, the Attorney General of Russia, through multiple meetings, emails, and other communications, these Russian agents made clear that their government supported Trump. Russia supported Trump, yes, indeed, and was prepared to use stolen emails and other information to damage his opponent and the Democratic Party. And instead of protesting or otherwise dissociating themselves, Trump campaign and its agents gleefully welcomed Russian help and interference. Indeed, the Trump campaign solicited openly Russia's illegal assistance, maintained secret communications with individuals tied to the Russian government, including one of the intelligence agencies responsible for attacking the DNC. So you get the idea. When you get some ignorant reactionary thug, plug ugly ogre, and they say, oh, there's no evidence of collusion. Yeah, sure there is. There's a ton. Get a hold of this document. You can read a lot of it. And notice the one who requested the Russian help was, as I recall, was Don himself. So they don't go quite directly after Don, but they go after the campaigns and the entities. I think they're trying to dodge that whole question about does he have the right to delay some kind of a civil suit while he's in office. So there we go with that situation. Now, in terms of Manafort, let's just remember Manafort is trying to weasel out of his criminal case. Manafort's argument had been that that Mueller had gone outside of the scope of his legal mandate, but that is countered by court papers filed by the Mueller Group saying that Manafort was a back channel for coordination with Russia. And one of the key people here is this character, Konstantin Kilimnik, Russian-Ukrainian dual citizen who attended the Soviet Military Academy. He's person A in some filings put in there by Mueller. He was trained in linguistics, military linguistics, information and psychological warfare, and also military law. It's his alma mater, now called the Military University of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. And Gates, we're told, informed Van der Zwaan, who's now gotten his month in jail, that this was a contact man, that this Kilimnik was somebody who could, he was an old boy from the GRU, and therefore he could be a go-between for various contacts. Now, elsewhere on the legal front, right, as we say, there have been two big court proceedings this week in the Stormy Daniels, McDougal versus Trump, Cohen, and so forth, right? McDougal has won her side of the case, right? And this, of course, was the National Enquirer. The National Enquirer says McDougal can do what she wants. She can tell anything she wants. They're going to leave her alone. She didn't have to pay back the $150K that they had paid her. So she's going to be out there now as a wild card continuously. On Monday, there was this hearing. What's going to happen with all the evidence seized during the FBI raids in Midtown? And again, the hotel, the apartment, the office, the safe deposit box, the emails, and maybe more. Who's going to get to see that first? Will it be pre-screened by the Trump-Cohen forces? And the answer from Kimbo Wood, no. It will be jointly reviewed, but the feds are looking at it. That's the word. Right? The feds are going through this stuff, and they're finding some very interesting things. Right? They took everything. In other words, they essentially copied everything on all the computers, hard drives, phones, and so forth. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. And here we go in this nice spring afternoon. But again, winter for the regime. We're told that Cohen, once again, will be indicted soon. That's his own lawyer talking. Now, Cohen is also there were two legal actions. One was the court appearances on Monday afternoon. That turned into a great media circus. Stormy was there. Avenatti was there, the lawyer for Stormy. And Stormy has continued campaigning. Stormy is a profile in courage, better than a whole lot of cable television commentators we could name. So that's moving along, and the evidence will not be pre-screened, pre-sifted, and pre-sanitized by the Trump forces. Now, today, Friday, we just had a parallel legal action in California. This is where Stormy is suing Cohen and company. Release me from this gag order, right, from this non-disclosure agreement. She wants to be freed from it. And but now Cohen is coming with the argument, wait a minute, I'm going to be indicted in the next 90 days, essentially. I don't want to be subjected to civil discovery, right, put through the ringer and having to share all my secrets. I would like all of that frozen and delayed for 90 days. Now, this doesn't make that much sense. There's also a slander, defamation lawsuit filed by Stormy. There is, of course, the other one, the Summer Zervos slander, defamation lawsuit against Trump personally. So he might be deposed, right? As we say, depositioned before he's deposed, right? Grilled before he's ousted. So that's all moving. And now in the middle of this, we have new lawyers for Trump. Oh my gosh. It's a soap opera that never ends, apparently. And in this case, it's two actual criminal lawyers coming in from Florida. But the dominant yap, the dominant talking head on the team will now be Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor. His presidential campaign was based on the formula verb, noun, 9/11. 9/11, 9/11, 9/11. Hey, on 9/11, lots of people working in the South Tower of the World Trade Center were told they could go back to their offices and shelter in place. Giuliani, according to numerous reports, was told to get out of there, right, to hightail it away. And then, of course, the South Tower hit second, turned out to be the first one to collapse. So what kind of a record of heroism is that? His staff offices apparently in Building 7, and that digs up once again the Building 7. Giuliani, of course, his father, Harold Giuliani, accused of being a member of the mafia, according to New York State prison records from the 1950s. Harold Giuliani, and then he went by a pseudonym, but apparently an organized crime figure, for sure a convict in Sing Sing prison in Ossining, New York. That's the original up the river on the banks of the Hudson up there. So that's a very embarrassing one. That has to be dug up. And then we have Bernard Kerik. This is another great moment, right? One of Giuliani's greatest hits. Bernie Kerik was made police commissioner of the city of New York and the corrections commissioner of the city of New York. In particular, police commissioner of the city of New York. This promotion came to him thanks to Rudy Giuliani. Now, Kerik was, according to some accounts, he was the chauffeur. He was the driver for Giuliani. He was part of his security detail. And then it turned out that he had employed an illegal immigrant as a nanny. Once again, nanny gate. He committed ethics violations, unclassified misdemeanors. He had to plead guilty in Bronx Supreme Court to those. He pled guilty in federal court to 8 federal charges, tax fraud and false statements, and he was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. So you take your security guy, your guerrilla, your goon, your driver practically, you make that guy the police commissioner of the city of New York. And of course, this is, the abuses. I don't know if they called it stop and frisk, but that's what it was, right? Under law and order, Giuliani, son of the mafioso, reputed Harold Giuliani. So he this Kerik had to surrender at the U.S. prison camp in Cumberland, Maryland, minimum security. He was he was incarcerated May 17th, 2010. He was discharged from federal custody on October 15th, 2013, then 5 months of home confinement, and his supervised release ended in October 2016, just in time for the election. So that's, this is the Trump world, right? We have the best people. We always have the best people. Well, how about that for judgment, right? You can call this, maybe this is the Michael Flynn of Giuliani's career. Now, very interesting. In addition to all of this, Giuliani is currently under the cloud of an FBI investigation. How do we know it? Well, we know it thanks to Comey. Comey's notes of his meetings with, it's a little bit indirect, but it's based on some commentaries. Let's go through it. Remember, Comey met with Trump in January 2017, during the transition, and then afterwards, right? January 10th, January 27th, some other meetings, and then fired on May 9th. In the course of this, and this has emerged primarily overnight, Comey now says that he ordered the beginning of an investigation of Giuliani and of other leaks coming out of the FBI. In particular, the New York City FBI field office was leaking pro-Trump. This was one of the main organs of the deep state, working hard to sabotage Hillary and bring Trump to power. So, for our present purposes, Comey started an FBI probe of Giuliani. What's the result? He says he doesn't know, but I guess the rest of us are still waiting. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we are going to put a lot of focus on Giuliani. You'll remember that 13 days before the fateful 2016 election, Giuliani was cavorting all over Fox News, Fox and Friends in the morning, Martha McCallum, I believe, later in the day, and asking, what's the program for the Trump campaign? He was a tireless surrogate for Don. He was somebody who degraded himself by continuing with his public event schedule in the wake of the Billy Bush Access Hollywood tape, despite the lewd conduct and moral turpitude engaged in by Trump that disgusted everybody, and a lot of people wouldn't campaign for Trump. But, of course, Giuliani was hoping for the Secretary of State job. He backed off on that one. I think he might have accepted the Attorney General spot, too. One wonders, those jobs, of course, require confirmation in front of the Senate. And did Giuliani back off from the plum jobs of the cabinet because he feared the kind of dirt that might come out on him during the confirmation hearings? Now, of course, in this case, there are no confirmation hearings, so it's going to be up to the free press to make sure that everybody knows about the nefarious activities of Giuliani. But anyway, according to Comey, Comey ordered a probe, a federal FBI investigation of Giuliani. This would be criminal because leaking, of course, is a crime, right? As Trump always says, leaking is a crime. That would be of Giuliani, of other leakers, including FBI leakers in the FBI New York field office. So remember, Giuliani came on those Fox News programs, and they said, what's going to happen? And he's going to say, something big is going to happen in a couple of days. And then what's it going to be? You'll find out. He does that at least twice. He's teasing. It's a strip tease by Giuliani to get everybody interested in what's going to go out. And then when it actually happened, right, the letter sent by Comey 11 days before the election saying, oh, my God, I've got the Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner email treasure trove, 100,000 emails, got to go through those. But I have to tell you that the investigation is on again. And, of course, concerning the far more serious, deliberate conniving with the foreign power alleged against Trump, he's mums the word, right? Comey doesn't say a word about that. So he's got a very, very one-sided partisan view. Of course, because this is the deep state. What did you think? Don't be fooled by that Republican demagogy. The deep state does exist. The liberals and the mainstream characters are wrong, but the deep state is what put Trump into power. And Giuliani, in this case, is somebody who appears as a public face for these deeper people that you have there along the way. There's also the fact that the memo includes a note about Giuliani, right? That there's going to be a probe of Giuliani, and the notes taken contemporaneously by Dana Bente or Boente, top Justice Department officials, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Rocket Docket. He says in his notes that there's going to be some kind of an investigation of Giuliani. So there's an investigation going. We want to see those results. Comey says he was ousted before the results came back. We want to hear those results. That's going to be another interesting thing. Now, of course, the questions to Comey are many. For example, at a certain point, Comey, you knew that Flynn was in the White House. You knew that Flynn was deeply compromised. He was still getting to see all the secrets he wanted. He's the NSC director. He was getting the presidential daily briefing. Did you do anything to stop him, to wall him off, to prevent him from getting his hands on U.S. state secrets? No. Did you let yourself be influenced? And this is from us now. Did you let yourself be influenced by a fake Russian document purporting to be communications between Loretta Lynch and the Clinton, well, in this case, other people coming from Loretta Lynch, saying that you would not allow the investigation of Hillary Clinton to go anywhere. Notice that Comey is concerned about public opinion. He's concerned about image. He says he had to inform the Congress that the investigation into Hillary had been reopened. He had to tell them that. Otherwise, it would have damaged the public image of the FBI. That does not pertain to you. That is not a public interest. The FBI has, God knows, more than enough public relations people. Comey, you needed to be concerned about laws and about the public interest, not about immediate polls. Don't be so interested in defending the FBI when it really means defending yourself. At one point, Comey says, there were some things I couldn't do. I couldn't be silent about the Huma Abedin and Weiner emails because that might bring on the end of the FBI as an independent force in American life. Are we nuts? The FBI cannot be an independent force. The FBI is a legally constituted agency of the federal government in the executive branch. It is therefore, in general, yes, subordinated to presidents, right? We don't want to let Trump destroy the office of the presidency, right? Nixon has weakened the presidency over decades with his crimes. You don't want to make a mistake and try to bar the door against some future Nixon or some future Trump by fatally weakening the form of government that we have. In other words, don't let Trump have the last laugh by going along with that. So the FBI is not an independent force in American life. It shouldn't be. Obviously, Comey thinks that he is a moral paragon, and this cuts in two ways, right? On the one hand, if moral paragon Comey says that Trump is morally unfit to be president, he's right. And this campaign is therefore welcome. And in general, we do welcome his book and his book tour. But at the same time, the greater problem is that Trump is morally insane and not just unfit for office, but his removal from office is a matter of some urgency, right? Given the obvious powerful foreign enemies, powerful nuclear dangers, and so forth. Then, this question about the leaks, right? Again, what did you do anything about this? And apparently, he didn't. So the outrageous thing about Comey is that this is more than any other single person, the one who threw the election to Trump. Now, the vicissitudes, the changing bedfellows of politics have obviously shifted the pattern of alliances, right? Once Trump unmasked even further, or whatever it was, the secret government factions or deep state factions in the FBI, some of them have shifted away. But also, if you look at the group around Comey, in particular, McCabe, don't worry about the fate of McCabe. What McCabe is being accused of right now is leaking during the election campaign in the service of Trump, leaking against Mrs. Clinton and in the service of Trump. Do you really want to get bent out of shape over that just because he seems to be the enemy of Trump today? No, it's not worth it. So this is a wilderness of mirrors, and we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Lo and behold, we've got to our final segment. Always so much more to do. Therefore, tune in on Monday at the American System, americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv. So the final thing for Comey is he says if Hillary had been elected and it had then emerged that there was the Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner emails, this laptop and so forth, that somehow Hillary's presidency would have been illegitimate from day one. Now, again, what the hell does that mean? He means illegitimate in terms of public opinion. And again, public opinion does not pertain to you, Comey. You cannot make such judgments. You have to make judgments based on law and facts in these cases and overall government policies, of course. Notions of priority, right, in prosecutorial discretion and things of that sort, although that's really more in the Justice Department. He seems to think, Comey seems to think that legitimacy is conferred by the FBI. That if the FBI is investigating you, you are illegitimate. And if the FBI clears your name, then you are legitimate. No. The sovereignty, take a look at that famous founding document. What does it? It doesn't say we the FBI. It says we the people. So the only ultimate court we have is voting. And, of course, voting means popular votes and then the ultimate selection through the Electoral College, right? That's a very flawed system. That's what we've got. But there's no role for the FBI anywhere in there. So the Republicans, of course, have sold out completely. And the left liberals, half the people they have commentating are federal prosecutors who obviously have a very high ideal, a high regard for the FBI and the Justice Department, to say nothing of the intelligence community in general. We note the fecklessness of Comey. Again, he didn't do anything during this period, right? This is still the old FBI. They're always trying to build cases for crimes. The purpose of the FBI in the modern age is to prevent these attacks, terrorist attacks, hacking attacks, active measures, Gerasimov's doctrine, hybrid warfare. The FBI has to stop them before they hit. And he doesn't get that part. So he does nothing. Loretta Lynch, also, as far as I can see, absolutely feckless, absolutely disoriented, right? Doing essentially nothing while Rome is under attack, one might say. So therefore, this is absolutely wrong. And again, McCabe, the leak that he's being given a hard time about now was a leak to defend how the FBI was dealing with Hillary Clinton, which was the essence of meddling in a political campaign. Now, here's an important point. Texas, right? We're getting the first polling from Texas. And what we find is in Texas, the Republicans are in deep, deep trouble. Yes, a blue wave. This is the most obvious manifestation of the blue wave that I have seen. Ted Cruz, right? Hypocrite and all the rest. Lying Ted. Yes, indeed. He earned it. Cruz is practically in a dead heat with Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke, the congressman from El Paso. There's about 4 points between them, or 5 points at the most, but the margin of error in this poll is plus or minus 3.6%. It's a Quinnipiac, I think. And we find that Cruz is essentially locked in a contention with O'Rourke, that Cruz is demonstrating dramatic weakness, shocking weakness, unexpected weakness. And one of the problems going on with Cruz is that he's being dragged down by none other than Trump. Trump is underwater in Texas. The disapproval of Trump in Texas, according to this poll, is 52%. The polling concerning Beto O'Rourke, this is less clear because it's he's not that well known. In other words, there's still a lot of people who have no opinion. But there it is. The Republicans in trouble in Texas, the biggest single electoral vote megastate that the Republican coalition has. Trump would not win re-election based on this, depending on who his opponent might be, but above all, Cruz for November now. And what does Cruz do with the complete political stupidity that marks him? He goes and writes a fawning, cringing, boot-licking essay about how great Trump is, despite the fact that Trump has attacked Cruz, right, as lying Ted, attacked Cruz's wife for being ugly, other monstrous, forms of, barbaric behavior by Trump, and his father, right, that his father was implicated in the Kennedy assassination. My God, Cruz has no honor. Cruz has no self-respect. He's essentially a valet, a stooge, a running dog. He's an eager servitor for Trump. And I think, I don't think that would go over big anywhere, but I have an idea that in Texas this is even more unacceptable. And you'll remember that Cruz had tried to set himself apart from Trump by pointing out that Trump represented New York values and that he was a big, loud, vulgar, stupid Yankee. Well, Cruz is now cringing and fawning and bowing and scraping. Together with this, one of the television networks, I guess it must have been Manu Raju of CNN, went around and tried to get various Republican senators to endorse Trump for 2020, for the presidency. He could not find any. He tried, I think the most important was Cornyn, right? John Cornyn, the other senator from Texas, wouldn't endorse Trump, right? He says, oh, it's premature, it's much too early. And I think they tried a number of others, and as far as I could see, not one of them was willing to give Trump a blank check. Now, the other thing, just bear this in mind, right? Over this past weekend, we had the bombing of Syria on Friday night. We then had the Russian ambassador here saying there are going to be consequences. Putin threatened chaos. What happened then? On Tuesday, the IRS website went down on tax day. Plausible argument that it was overloaded, but maybe not. What's the pattern? On the same day, lots of people lost Twitter for an hour or so. Britain, Japan, many parts of the United States, Northeast, Midwest, California, Canada, lots and lots of Twitter going down. The day after that, Puerto Rican blackout. Plausible explanation there too, a minor accident. And then McMaster's father reported dead a few days ago in a retirement home. And you wonder, what is all of that? Is there any common denominator? Is there any pattern that we can discern? Well, McMaster in particular, I would say he's the guy who got the expulsions up to 60. So he's the one who did the end run around Trump and the Trump loyalists. So again, we had about a week ago a joint U.S.-British declaration saying the Russians were taking over all the routers on the entire internet around the world and that they were preparing some kind of an action. And of course, given this feckless appeaser in the White House, right, the rule of cowardice, there's no organized defense, kind of like Pearl Harbor. No reconnaissance and no defense. So this, again, a recipe for disaster. The main thing we can do is to say no personal diplomacy, no summits, enough of that. Just restaff the State Department and let them work for a year. And maybe the rest of it will take care of itself. So this has been World Crisis Radio, and we'll see you again next week. But, of course, on Monday at the American System, AmericanSystem.tv.